Well, hello there. We're going to start. I know we're a minute or two behind, and I know we have a couple more people who will be joining us as our evening progresses. I want to thank each and every one of you for carving out time on a Thursday night, last day of spring, to learn about some things that we're talking about in Maricopa Unified School District. My name is Tracy Lopman, and I am the superintendent here. I have the pleasure of serving as the superintendent in Maricopa Unified School District. There's some people I want to introduce who are also have the pleasure of serving here as well. We have our board members here in the audience, even though they are they're seated separately tonight, like community members, but they're really our board members, so I want to make sure that they're recognized. Vice President of the Board, Ben Owens. Yay. Member Patty Coutray. Member Mr. Josh Judd. We also have some elected officials here tonight. We enjoy tremendous support and partnership from business and city officials here in Maricopa. We have Vice Mayor Wade. Thank you. And Maricopa City Council member Vince Manfredi. We have other members of our great school community here as well. We had a capital planning committee. I know some of the folks who participated in the capital planning committee are here, and that was made up of certainly elected officials, business folks, parents, administrators, and we have some teachers and administrators here tonight. Raise your hand if you're a teacher enjoying summer. Yay. Let's hear it for them. We have two principals here. Thank you for coming. And we also have some parents and some community members as well. Do we have any faith-based leaders in the house? Nice. Okay, because we're going to need that. So I want to provide a little context for our evening. You can see on our screen here we have the Maricopa Why, because we start with why in Maricopa. And that Maricopa Why was crafted last fall in this room with 100 or so people, a number of whom are here with us today. And it's that why that drives our work. It's what gets us out of bed in the morning and keeps us up late at night, grading papers, and working and volunteering. I'm going to select one of those statements out of that Maricopa Why. That is particularly meaningful. It speaks to creating a premier education system that is the cornerstone of a vibrant city. And that's why we are here tonight, to talk about creating a premier education system as the cornerstone of a vibrant city. So after 3 months of collaboration with a big group who gathered to talk about the Maricopa Why and form a strategic plan, 4 goals emerged from that strategic plan over the course of those months. In a summarized fashion. Goal 1, every student graduates. Number 2, 100% access and equity. Number 3, an organizational culture that prioritizes people over programs. And goal number 4 is community pride through excellent customer service, safe and attractive facilities, and sound business practices. So that's what brings us here tonight. So in order to accomplish those goals, we're going to be digging in deep, and we're going to do a lot of hard work, a ton of hard work. And all of that work will be done through 2 lenses, and that's transparency and collaboration. And that's the priority tonight, is transparency about all the elements that are going to be impacting our future here in Maricopa Unified, and the fact that we need to hear from every voice. We need to hear from every individual. And so that's why we're here to share a bit of the story, but we're also here to listen. So with that, I'll let you know how we have our objective facilitators here tonight from capital planning. We have our architect here. We also have an individual who can support us with other questions regarding the possibility of an upcoming election and the tax implications of a possible bond election. So all of that information will be shared. There will be plenty of time for questions and feedback as well. I'm going to turn it over to Mark Rafferty, facilitator of our capital planning committee over the past 10 months.
Thank you. Good to see a lot of you again. I'm going to go, Dr. Lopeman asked me to sort of outline the steps that have already been taken in the capital master plan. The very first thing that happened, and I think that was during the summer last year, is the district hired my company to do a life cycle forecast. And that's important because that life cycle forecast became really one of the cornerstones. We'll get into high school capacities in a little bit, but it became one of the cornerstones of the capital plan. A life cycle forecast involves looking at everything on buildings, grounds, interiors, exteriors, systems within existing facilities, everything that has a life cycle. Carpeting, roofing, are the easy stuff, lighting. Even fire alarms have life cycles, asphalt has life cycles. We measured all of that, all those materials district-wide. Then we assessed them in terms of how many years of their life cycle do they have left. That all goes into our database, and what it tells the district is what it can reasonably expect year over year its obligation will be to replace things that are out of service. Carpeting that's worn out, roofing those are the easy ones, roofing that's worn out. That life cycle analysis, as I said, interiors, exteriors, systems, and grounds. Our determination was that usually when we do that for district, we've done about 25 districts. Because of the nature of the economy and SFB funding over the last 8 or 10 years, a lot of replacement of things that are effectively out of service has been deferred. So typically in our analysis, year one is disproportionately high in terms of cost to replace things that are either broken or out of service, because those things have all been deferred. What we came up with for Maricopa Unified in year one is $8.7 million worth of things that really need to be replaced. It's nothing really has been done here in terms of only preventative maintenance. In other words, no real what we would call building renewal things that the SFB used to pay for. Then it drops down to about $2 million per year for the next 4 to 5 years. So that $8 million represents a lot of backlog. After we did that, and knowing that there were capacity issues, particularly at the high school, the district hired a demographer to do a demographic study and understand what the projected growth in enrollment was going to be over a period of probably 10 years. And I have that here, bear with me, this is my roadmap. The growth in enrollment was expected to be nearly 500 students per year, every year for the next 10 years. That's quite a delta. Right now, that capacity exists in it doesn't exist in the middle schools, with 6, 7, and 8 in the middle schools, but capacity exists in the elementary schools. It's about at capacity in the middle schools. And Mr. Winter, how far over 1,800 students are you right now?
Over 1,800, about 600.
Okay. Well, our capacity analysis puts your school at 1,800. So somehow you've managed to squeeze another 600 or 33% into those spaces. And that's one of the reasons why the portable classroom project, consisting of 16 new classrooms, is being developed at your site for the beginning of the new school year. So we'll talk about new space in a minute. That was the demographic study, 500, average 500 per year over the next 10 years. I talked about the analysis. So once we had that background information, the life cycle and the demography and the capacities tell us how much new space you're going to need. Am I on? I'm not ready yet. I'm good. This is just my background. It tells us how much space you're going to need and how soon. We reasonably believe that we've talked, Jim, I remember saying to you one time, you said in one of our capital committee meetings, sounds like we should have started yesterday. Yep. And what did I say? I said, you should have started last year. Remember that? Because the rate at which new space can be developed, regardless of the funding method, is particularly with high schools, is fairly slow. It's a lot, 500 a year. That's a new elementary school every year. So in our meetings, we had 4 meetings. The first meeting was really just giving the background. It was giving the demographics. It was talking about, what bonds are like and how they affect tax rates or don't. Right, Mike, you had some background information. We also talked to the demographer. I spoke about the life cycle forecast. We also talked about what bond projects really are. Presuming you have capital bond, how do you formulate those projects? How do you prioritize them, et cetera? So we're just really giving a background to the whole topic. Meeting number 2 was building a capital plan. So the capital plan, then, now you start to consider other things that could be considered capital. So you're talking about building renewal elements, things to just keep what you currently have operating. We talked about dry, cool, and clean being the 3 highest priorities, so safety being first. But we talked about new space. We talked about energy-related projects, in other words, energy upgrades, LED lighting, et cetera, something that could be used to lower your overall energy costs. You're an ED3, you're a little bit of an anomaly as an electrical district, and anything that you can do to save energy, you'll benefit more than any other school district probably in the state. And we even talked about solar with battery storage as being a huge defeater of energy costs. The information technology and a budget for IT for learning. We talked about student transportation and how those also are on a life cycle. They don't run forever. And I'm not going to go through defining all of those anymore, but at the end of the day, or rather the third meeting was prioritization. What's the highest priority? And I think everybody agreed that high school space is something that would have to be considered the highest priority because you have no other alternatives than to add capacity. Then we talked about safety also, and installing or building make safe measures at the building's perimeter and at the site's perimeter and at the entry, the lobby, the control point for visitor management. The fourth meeting was titled Consensus, and I've done a number of these, and I would say that we had 20 to 22 people at each one of these meetings, these 4. The group was pretty consistent meeting over meeting, so by the fourth meeting, there were people that really knew the subject, really knew about the background, what a bond project was, how to prioritize. And if those of you that were here would remember that I really made one lap around the room, and that was it, right? And I've never really just had consensus with a whole group, a very diverse and dynamic group, and had consensus of the whole group on the first lap around the room. And so you were one of them, right? You saw that. Okay, so next. This is a little wordy, but I think everybody here probably knows what the purpose was. Some needs seemed to be present in terms of capacity and security, et cetera. So that's why the in-depth study and the discussions and the background information was developed. Ultimately, the committee, as I said, was very, very diverse. Many of you are here tonight. We had faith leaders, we had principals, we had board members, members of the community, Chamber of Commerce, local government. At the end of the day, we came up with really kind of a capital master plan summary. One of the things that was striking to me, and I've told this story several times because this happened, I think, in January, was that I had put the energy cost savings projects in priority 3. And one of the first people on that one lap around the room said that they thought that the energy cost savings projects should be priority number 1. And not everyone, but every other person going around seconded that and said that energy savings should be a priority number 1. And we'll hear from Mike Lavallee from Stiefel in a few minutes in terms of it's a good idea to have energy projects in the front of the line, but you have such a capacity issue right now at the high school level that it's going to probably push those types of things aside. That's my purpose. Here again is background. These are just kind of snapshots from the summary document. The grand total of, you can see what those things primarily consist of. Roofing and HVAC are huge subjects here at this district. I know, Scott, this is your day-to-day life as facility director, right? Managing roofing and HVAC failures. I think the reason it's important to try to capitalize these types of projects is because these are the things that you have to deal with out of maintenance and operation. And maintenance and operation is fairly unlimited. Fairly. I mean, in terms of maintenance and operation. So it can either go into operations or it can go into maintenance. So if you're not replacing a roof with M&O, you can use it for something else. That's what I mean. Over in the right, this is something that's interesting. The boom happened in Maricopa when it did, starting in the late 90s and into the early 2000s. When we do life cycle forecasting, we have an age group that we call the 12 to 16ers. Because between 12 and 16 years, most primary building systems, I said dry, cool, and clean, that would be roofing, HVAC, and interior finishes. At 12 years, they begin to go out of service. They begin to be a maintenance issue. By 16 years, they are all out of service. The rooftop air conditioning units that you have, particularly in a dusty climate, 16 years is the end of the life cycle for those pieces of equipment. They can be kept alive longer, but they're very inefficient at that point and very expensive to maintain. It's just like at your house. You can always get your HVAC fixed, but at a certain point, it just makes more economic sense to replace it. And all of your schools, except for the high school, are between 12 and 16 years old. You're in that right smack in that age group. Energy savings projects, we looked at LED lighting conversion, HVAC energy management systems. Modern systems for energy management have motion detectors in every room and contacts on every door. If no one's in the room, the set point for the air conditioning goes up and the lights go out. And when someone enters the room, the reverse happens. And it's striking how much energy can be saved using that one simple thing. Technology we really didn't define. We did put dollars in the budget for technology based on learning, and I don't know what the curricular forecast is, but it was important to plug a number into that for technology. Student transportation. That's about 6 or 7 new buses every year for over 3 cycles. Those priorities were originally defined as being 2 years apart. So priority 1 would be next year, priority 2 would be 3 years, priority 3 would be 5 years out. Variations. This is kind of an interesting thing. I'm going to read this. The district may consider design variations starting with the size of the school site, various design components such as classroom building size, inclusion of sports fields, and parking. And in a minute, I'm going to talk about what a phase 1, or maybe I could have Don talk about what a phase 1 of a high school would be. The financial model that I put together is modeled after the phase 1 high school Eastmark that's in the Queen Creek School District that's being opened in about a week. So reduction of priority 1 projects. The combination of energy savings, priority 1 projects or the life cycle based cannot be reduced, they can only be delayed. So and the only reason you would allow those to be delayed is if you felt like there was going to be an opportunity for another bond, election in a very near term. Otherwise, those things really have to be managed. Energy and water savings projects, the effect that I'm completing an comprehensive energy project in another district in the Valley. The cost of their electricity is being cut by 80%. So a small district with $800,000 average cost of electricity, their energy costs are now going to be $200,000 per year. SFB Building Renewal Grants. The easy grants that we've been seeing, or the ones that are most easily qualify and get paid for by the SFB, are exterior weatherproofing, which is painting and caulking and sealants, and roofing. HVAC is a little tougher because it has to actually fail before you can even submit. So you have to be able to do without a space that unit cools for 4 to 6 months, before you can get the SFB to take care of it. So if you can do without the space, that works. I put together a couple of scenarios. These are really menus. Scenarios 1 through 3, all the parts are interchangeable. Most of them are the same. So all 3 scenarios have a new high school phase 1. That's 155,000 square feet in 3 years or 2 years would be $325 a square foot, including land improvements. That means minimal fields, parking, etc. 80-acre school site, that's what we've been advised. Don Brubaker, the district's architect, has said forever that it's to get all the necessary components to a complete high school, it's 75 to 80 acres. And we've worked with land advisors to understand what the property values are approximately in this area. High school FF&E, that's fixtures, furnishings, and equipment. That's just tables and chairs and desks and other various types of non-IT equipment, or including IT equipment. Priority 1 projects, roofing, weatherproofing, security measures, that's the make safe at the 2 perimeters and in the lobbies, and we allowed $500,000 per site for those efforts. HVAC, technology, transportation, energy savings, and water savings. You can see the numbers. The total is $98,200,000. Right now, the district has a commitment from the SFB for new space of $26.2 million, leaving a balance of $72 million. Scenario 2 is the same thing, except deleting solar with battery storage. Scenario 3 It's the same thing, but with no energy savings initiatives and no water savings. And that brings the total, well, it goes from 72 to 63.5 to 56. And I think that's all I have. Any questions? Wow, that was a brilliant delivery, apparently.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Mike Lavallee, and I'm with the investment bank Stifel Nicholas. We are most of you have heard my spiel before, but I recognize some new faces in the audience. We're headquartered in St. Louis, so I like to call us a Main Street firm versus a Wall Street firm. I've been doing business, our group, here in Arizona for 24 years for me. A lot of our bankers have been in Arizona 30 plus years. I'm just an Arizona guy. Native of Arizona, been working mainly with Arizona K-12 districts for my entire career. I've had the pleasure of serving Maricopa Unified School District since, I'm trying to think back, 1997, 1998. So, meeting at that little schoolhouse across the highway over there for many, many, many years, and then watching it grow. Helping the district leverage funding from the SFB over the years, and then also with bond elections and other items like refinancing debt. So when it makes sense to replace old debt at higher rates with new debt at lower rates, we've helped the district take advantage of that, similar to refinancing your home mortgage. So we've been working with the district for many, many years, and I'm very thankful for that. I also do work across the state, like I mentioned, mainly with school districts, but our department covers the largest issuers all the way down to the smallest issuers. State agencies, universities, cities and towns. So we're everywhere across Arizona, anybody who needs to borrow money and do municipal bond issues. I specifically work, one of my specialties is working with high growth districts. I cover the areas of the Buckeye area, all the districts there. I cover just about every school district in the Pinal County area. I cover Queen Creek. Mr. Rafferty mentioned Queen Creek, the high school they're building. We've helped finance that. That's a combination of SFB funding and bonding. They've actually had to do some other types of financing ahead of bonding in order to get it going because they're so behind. Because assessed value, this is all about assessed values when you do bond issues, and I'm going to get into that in just a minute. But assessed values hit 2 years after somebody moves in. What I mean by that is if somebody builds a house in a community, that house gets built, people move in, they send their kids to that school day one once they move in, right? The new house value, the tax value, doesn't hit the tax rolls for 18 months to 2 years. There's a lag. And bonding is based on assessed values, tax values. And the ability to borrow money is based on a percentage of those values hitting the tax rolls, especially in a high growth area. Always about an 18-month to 2-year lag from when students actually move into the district boundaries. So it's very complicated and very difficult for high growth districts to build schools on time. You're not getting a whole lot of money from the SFB. It's nice to get $26 million, but the cost of a high school is twice that. So we're here to fill in the gaps with most of our clients. And anyway, so let me talk about a little bit more about assessed values. Here we go. This is a 10-year history of the school district's assessed valuation history. I have two bars here. One's blue and one's red, going back 10, 11 years. We touch on right before the recession of 2008. The downturn happened in after 9/10, down to 2010-11 was the big downturn there. You can see how it flattened out by 2014-15, and then it started to turn back up. Now remember, these are tax values, and they lag what's going on in the market by 18 months to 2 years. Okay, so for instance, now you see an uptick here. And I'm just looking at the blue and the red, generally speaking. You're on an upward trend. We have the newest number here in 1920. That's the far right, 2 bars. Those values came out in February, but they become final the third Monday in August. It's for the 2019-20 fiscal year. So the district's assessed valuation for the 2019-20 year, the blue bar, is $390 million. Not expected to change. It will probably be approved at $390 million. And then the red bar, which I'll talk about the differences here in a minute, is $311 million. Okay, so that's a 10.8% increase over the prior year on the blue over blue, and the red over red, an 8% increase over the prior year. So you see it, but that also reflects what actually happened in Maricopa 18 months to 2 years ago. These are tax values. They lag market values. So this growth reflects what happened already. So everything you're seeing now is probably going to impact the assessed valuations a year or 2 or even 3 years from now, just because of the lag. Okay. A couple other points I'll mention. Well, so the blue is the net full cash assessed value. It's more in line with, closer in alignment with market values. Okay. The red is the limited property value. That's what the district calculates its tax rates on. It's formula driven. So it lags the real market values, the real growth of districts. It lags it because it's restricted by formula. The formula is existing property owners. If their value, their home values, market value grows 10% year over year, the tax value can only grow up to 5%. There's a cap on how quickly tax values grow for existing residential, any properties, existing commercial and whatnot. So, however, you can add on new growth. So if a new home is built, it goes from agricultural and vacant zoned to residential zoned. It goes from a $20,000 vacant raw piece of land to a $150,000 home. It's going to hit the tax. It's going to have that growth built in. Okay, but once after that first year happens, thereafter it can only grow by 5%. That's the red. So the red is restricted by formula. That's how the district calculates its tax rates. It lags really what's happening with real market values, which is more in alignment with the blue column. Okay, a couple other things I'll mention here because it's important before I show you some bonding scenarios. The 10-year historical growth average. It's hard to see up there, but the 10-year average for all of the reds is 0.82%, less than 1% average, because of the Great Downturn. Okay, that Great Downturn, the first couple years, you can see the declines. Well, that eats into the 10-year average. The 5-year average has been 5.3 to 6.2%. So over the last 5 to 6 years, the district's been growing 5 to 6% clip in growth. And if you think about all the growth you're seeing now in the last year that hasn't hit the tax rolls, it is likely that your growth going forward may even be higher than 5 or 6% going forward for at least the next 2, 3, 4 years. Okay? So the 10-year average is 0.82, less than 1%. And the 5-year average is somewhere between 5 and 6%. Okay? That's a big difference. Because when we go to size bond issues for elections, for voter pamphlets, Arizona revised statutes require us to size the bond issues. We can project growth and assess value. We can project growing this tax base. However, we're restricted to the 10-year historical growth average, which is less than 1% for your district and for the likes of Queen Creek, all the previously fast-growing areas before the recession that are now coming out of it and growing again. All the areas, all the Buckeye areas, all the Pinal County areas, all the Queen Creeks, East Valley areas, they're all in a similar situation where their 10-year averages are in the tank. Some of them are negative. And, I have a client, I think it's Buckeye Elementary, who had 14% growth this year. Their 10-year average is, I don't even think it's 0%. And they're having an election, just like Maricopa. And so we're not able to really project growth and value, even what I would call conservative growth, a more realistic growth. We have to show in the voter pamphlet basically flat growth, 0%. Like they're not going to grow in the voter pamphlet. They're not going to grow at all. That has a huge impact on the tax rate estimate for bonds. And so what I'm going to show you here in just a minute is 2 scenarios for each bond issue. So you saw Mr. Rafferty's bond sizes, estimates, cost of construction for all various projects, 72 million, and then somewhere in the 60 million, 63, and about 56. Well, had I had those specific numbers, I would have put those exactly to paper, but I didn't. So we did 75 million at its high. It's very close to 72. Then we have 60 million. Then we did 65 million, and then, 75, 65, 60, and then 50. So a range between 50 and 75. So I'm going to show you 4 scenarios, 50, 60, 65, and 75, and the tax impact associated with that. But each of those scenarios, there's really 2 scenarios per bond size. One scenario is using the 10-year average, because that's what's going to be in the voter pamphlet. The voter pamphlet is going to show a tax impact using the 10-year historical growth average here, which is 0.82% growth going forward. Okay, and then the other scenario is what I would call a more realistic scenario of 5% growth for 5 years. We're growing the tax base by 5%. Again, the 5-year average is around 6 right now, and we do think that growth would probably be higher going forward, especially what we're seeing. But we're using 5% growth for 5 years, and then we drop it down to 3% thereafter. Okay, so let me show you what the results are. You're going to see 8 scenarios. I'm sorry if it seems like quite a bit, but really there's 4 scenarios here. The first 2 are 50, the second 2 are 60, the next 2 are 65, and then the bottom 2 are 75. All the 1A, 2A, 3A, and 4A lines for each of the bond sizes is that voter pamphlet restricted growth. We're using 0.82% to project the value of the assessed valuation of the district, 0.82%. Okay? Then all the B scenarios, 2B, 1B, 2B, 3B, and 4B, for the same sizes, 50 through 75, is what I would call a more realistic assessed value projection going forward, 5% per year for 5 years. And then we bring it down. Again, 5-year window seems reasonable to project what we can kind of see. And then after that, we bring it down to be conservative. We bring it down to 3%. So with 5% growth for 5 years and the 3% thereafter, here's a difference in tax impact for all these scenarios. I'll start with the 50. I'm going to skip that middle column there, the estimated maximum tax rate. I'll get to that in just a minute. The average annual tax impact for $50 million is, again, using voter pamphlet restricted growth. I'm looking at scenario 1A, the top line, 0.88, 88 cents per $100 of assessed valuation. 88-cent impact for $50 million. That's what would be in the voter pamphlet. You move the decimal over. What's the cost to a $100,000 tax value home? That's the far right column, $88 per year. Just move on a $100,000 home, you just move the decimal over 2 places. So it's pretty easy. If your home, it's not what your home is valued at, market what you could sell it for, okay, 250 grand or whatever. If it's not what you can sell it for, it's the tax value. So when you see your tax values, they're always lower than the market values. Tax values are usually 85% of your market value, somewhere around there, 82 to 88%. Okay, well, I'm showing you tax value, a $100,000 tax value home. Okay, so if you go back and look at your personal home's mortgage, your tax statement from the county, your assessor, and you have a $200,000 value, you can just double this amount to get a ballpark about what the cost is to your residential home. Okay, it'd be just double. If your home is worth $150,000, you can do the math. Okay, so that's why we showed on $100,000 here, because then it's pretty easy to do the math from there for an individual. And so that kind of information is going to show up in a voter pamphlet. So it's $88 a year, again, using very restricted growth projections, 0.82% growth. Now, here's the more realistic tax impact, we believe, on $50 million. Using 5% growth for the next 5 years, instead of 88 cents, it's 55 cents, about $55 a year. So if the district continues to grow at 5% a year in assessed valuation, which I think is probably a low, it's probably going to be higher than that the next 5 years, the real tax impacts on average will be about $55 a year for 50 million. So this is, typically we don't show two scenarios. About 2 years ago, we didn't need to show two scenarios, so the 10-year average was close enough. Now that the 10-year average is really hurting districts, we are showing two scenarios, just to give you an understanding that what you're going to get in the voter pamphlet is artificially, in my opinion, elevated versus what the reality will likely be. Okay? So that's the $50 million scenario. Then we show 60. It's the same concept. The 2A is the voter pamphlet. What you would show up in a voter pamphlet, $1.07 impact, move the decimal over, $107 a year. What we believe the real impact would be is $66 a year, $67 a year on 60 million. And then you can go on down, 65, I'll go up to 75 million, $141 in the voter pamphlet, $84.53, $85 a year for 75 million for the $100,000 home. Now the maximum tax rate, I'm going back to that middle column, and then I'll conclude. This is my only 2 slides. Okay, I condensed something from 50 pages down to 2. The maximum tax rate just shows what we believe the estimated highest tax rate impact is in any given year, including the district's outstanding bonds. The district's currently paying on bonds from previous projects, right? And so there's already a tax rate in place, a bond rate in place, and then you're layering in, if the voters approve it, we'd be layering in new debt on top of the old tax rates. And so we show you the maximum tax rate here for 50 million all the way up to 75 million. The maximum tax rate, including the old debt. Okay, so that gives you an idea. For instance, on 50 million, let's look at the realistic scenario 1B. It's $1. We think the bond rate going forward, the maximum rate would be around $1.43. To borrow 50 million, to ask the voters for 50 million, and that's on top of the old debt already. $1.43, move the decimal over, is $143 annually for a $100,000 home. So that's kind of the math on bond tax rates. Okay, that's taking into account the old debt. But what we're asking the voters for would be just 50 million to 75. That old debt is already voted in and sold. And that money was used to improve schools, to build schools, to fix things, to buy buses and everything else. Okay, so and now the residents who voted that in are paying tax rates already. This just shows you a maximum estimated tax rate going forward for each of these scenarios. It ranges from roughly $1.43 for 50 million all the way to $1.64. I'm looking at the more realistic scenarios, 5% growth. $1.64 for 75 million. So a lot of scenarios there, I know, but it's also because there's a range of projects, prioritization. The voters want 72 million, or do they want 56, or something in between? So I'm happy to answer any questions you have. So I was here. Yes, sir.
How much of the estimated maximum tax rate is the outstanding debt?
I knew somebody would ask that, so I brought my big detailed. Let me look real quick. Oh boy, do I have it on here? I do not have it in here. Yes, I do. Here we go. The current estimated bond tax rate for the outstanding debt is currently at $1.27.
Really only asking for an increase of the 16 cents,
$1.27 currently, and if you have growth in assessed value like we're projecting, that would go down, it would trend down. So $1.27, like for instance 1920, for this coming year, the tax rate might be around $1.20 for bonds. Okay, so let's call it $1.20 for 50 million. You know, it's now we're estimated to be about $1.67, about a 47-cent difference. Even though we're showing 80, I'm sorry. Let's look at $1.43, the more realistic scenario. $1.43 for 50 million. That's 1B. We're right now around $1.20 coming up in 1920. So about a 23-cent difference in the maximum rates. Correct. The overall impact would be 55 cents per year over the life of the bond program, but the maximum, we believe the maximum rate would be about $1.43 throughout the life of the program. Yes, sir.
What's the life of the bond?
Every bond issue, Arizona's a pretty conservative state. We can only borrow money over 20 years. And now we're assuming several bond sales over elections are good for 10 years. Okay, so if the voters authorize 50 million or 75 million, we will then sell it down in chunks. Okay, maybe the first sale is 15 million or 25 million or something like that. You come back a couple years later and sell another chunk. But every bond sale cannot be more than 20 years. You can go shorter, but it depends on the projects. If you're building a high school, that high school has a useful life of 30, 40. I know some high schools are, in use 80 years later. So you'll be paying the debt off over 20 years. That's the maximum. Our home mortgages are 30, right, or 15, right? Pretty conservative for 20-year paper on useful life projects of, we'll call it 30-plus years. Any other questions? Well, I'm available. If anybody else has any questions later on, I'll be sitting right over here. Thank you for having me this evening. Appreciate it.
We had another volunteer come in. I want to introduce Anna Marie Moore, our board president. That was a ton of information that has been developed over the past 10 months, obviously. A number of us have heard it. This is probably the fourth or fifth time. So I'm curious about what stands out for you, or what questions you might have, what your reactions are, yes.
I'll just give a reaction.
Please.
Just one of the things that kind of stood out to me, and I appreciate that you did the different scenarios, so the three different scenarios. The third scenario leaving out some of the things like energy savings, because when I think I heard correctly, our energy cost is $800,000 a year. Is that correct?
That's a project that I'm currently finishing.
Oh.
Nothing else to do. That's
Okay.
an example.
Okay. I wasn't sure what our energy costs. They're more. Okay. Because when I heard that, I thought, well, if you're going to spend $15 million on energy projects, your ROI is out 19 years, and it wouldn't make sense to save $800,000 a year if you're going to have to pay out $15 million in year one. So I just wanted to make sure that they were looking at those things. So that was my first reaction, was that it was a positive that somebody was actually looking at those things and considering that some of the items on the list, although they may be good ideas, may not make financial sense for us to do. So that was my initial reaction.
Thank you for the
Yeah.
Yes.
It was mentioned that other districts, I think Queen Creek was used as an example, have to kind of hustle and find funding before a bond is even asked for. Are we looking at selling unused land specifically, say, the San Rosa Springs lot? And if so, how are we moving forward with that?
We are working with a broker right now to get an understanding of everything that we own and understand the potential of possible sale, donation. There's a number of scenarios that we are going to explore over the next weeks and months.
we talk about sites and buildings, have we started a feasibility study from the community to see if this is even possible sell?
You mean in terms of the climate of our community?
Yeah, as far as the election to sell bonds, which I would hope we all agree has to happen before you can talk about sites at all. That there needs to be a concentrated effort real soon if you want to get it on the November election to do that. So I guess, what has been done as far as.
I'll turn it over to Paul. You can speak to that.
That was sort of a leading question.
There you go. I'll take the softball. So the answer, so my name is Paul Ulam. My company is Primary Consultants. I work with school districts across the state on feasibility work, doing exactly that and sort of testing the climate, political climate. And so we surveyed 400 voters within, high efficacy voters in the district, and we tested three scenarios for that. And so there is community support for the bond, for some type of bond. I will say, anytime, if I get 5 million, 10 million, or 15 million, I'm gonna, if I'm offered 5, would I rather pay 5 million versus 10 versus 15? The lower amount is always gonna be better. But in general, there was support for that $50 to $75 million in that.
Yeah, how much?
Okay, I will, because I didn't have the power. We tested 75, and it was 58% support, 58% yes, 31% no. Then we asked respondents, so if you said yes on the 75, we did not ask a lower amount. So we made the assumption that if you're supporting the 75, you'd support a 50 or you'd support a 35. So of the 50, we picked up 15, it was 15% yes, which those raw numbers, actually I should look at this. Was approximately another 6%. So you go to 64, 65%. And then we asked the final question again, so if they said yes to 50, we didn't ask the 35. So the 35 said no to 70, no or unsure to 75 or 50. The 35% was 16% yes, which was another 6%. So you get almost to 70% supporting $35 million.
What's a typical support threshold for a successful bond?
What you'd like to, and that's a great question, and every community is different, and part of it is an even year or an odd year, and what turnout, what do you look like, what else is on the ballot. You'd like to be at 60%. You'd like to start at 60% or higher. That sort of gives you that threshold for it. So again, recap. We were at 58 at 75, picked up another 7% for 50, and another 60% at 35. So that was 70%. 70% of the voters, assuming those that support a higher amount would approve a lower amount, was 70% for 35 million. Okay. High efficacy voters within Maricopa Unified School District, and that was done. It seems like so it was April 24th through the 30th. We were even 49% male, 64% have been living at their present address for 6+ years. higher education levels. Again, it was self-identified. 60% had college plus, and 59% of our vote, the people we talked to, were 50 plus. So I mean, we're 59% of the people we talked to were 50 years or older. They're the ones who vote. They're the ones who vote. Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to give you an idea, so we actually 24% were parents of current students, 15% were parents of former students, 49% were had never had kids in the district, 11% either went to charter or private school, and 4% were employees. And I always give you that, so I didn't call, for Dr. Loatman, I did not call 400 parents and 380 employees that also had kids in the district, and they're supportive of a bond or an override election. So, yes.
So on that note, what can we do as a district or as a community to switch that number around and get more parents to vote?
I'm not sure that, I'm not sure that this is the forum for that, but I think what you're trying to do is provide factual information and getting people engaged in the process. That's really, you want to empower people to have knowledge and information about the district and the bond and the importance of the bond and the impacts of the bond and the consequences of the bond. And that knowledge is power. I mean, providing that information is powerful. I remind people I have 2 kids who are of voting age, and believe it or not, they're 20 and 22. So they're very high efficacy voters for their age, because I bring a ballot to them and I buy dinner, okay, and I harvest their ballot and I bring it to the polls. So that's the way you do it. You get it takes a long time, unfortunately, to change habits. And when we talk about who votes in elections, and that has some impact, those that tend to be a little bit older tend to have a more vested interest, and so they are watching their pocketbook, and they're watching what's on the ballot and paying attention, because it impacts them in a different way.
This is to district leadership. I would like to see, and I would be happy to be part of it, to get more parents involved in voting. There's a lot of new residents that don't even realize they need to change their voting. That would be
And I would add with that this is not a Maricopa problem. I mean, this is I think the number is around 16 to 18% when you look at statewide, as far as voters voting, parents voting in a bond or override election. They represent a small portion. That's why it's important that we're here, that it's not a room full of parents or a room full of staff, that we have community members, because community members really determine the impact of a bond or an override, and they are impacted because your schools are no longer a school. They are a community facility. They're used year-round. They're used by the community. They are an asset, not a liability, and that's part of what the district needs to continue to communicate in every district, not just Maricopa. Did that answer the question, sir?
Perfect.
What other questions? Yes, Mrs.
I
Grace.
had a question. This is more for, I know this conversation is more dealing with the bulk of acquiring funding in the future, if we're lucky, maybe 3 years down the line, getting process going for new high school. But what are we doing in the here and now to address the concerned parents of the overcapacity high school? I know portables are an answer. Are they ready to be up and running for the first day? If you don't have these answers,
Oh, I got lots of answers. Yeah. Okay.
I would like for parents to have some kind of communication to say, this is what we're doing. Are 4 counselors enough? Do we have enough counselors? Is security? Do we have enough security? Are all the teachers hired for the first day of school? Do we have enough programs? You know what I mean? Parents are concerned that
We're doing a great deal at the high school to make sure that we are going to properly accommodate and educate our students on day one. If you've driven on the 347 past the high school, you will see 8 portable classrooms there. 3 of those are brand new. 5 of them are gently used. We're working with the city daily to get them prepared for occupancy on July 1. Everything is on time at this point. Our architect is here who works, and Mark Rafferty. These 2 gentlemen, Don Brubaker and Mark Rafferty, are working daily to ensure that the process is on track. Mr. Winter is here, and I think we probably communicate daily about the hiring that is going on. We've added 10 positions at the high school. Those are regular education positions in addition to a few other special education positions, and that's been kind of a shift. We have had teachers who teach overloads, and if that's not to get too complicated, but we are returning teachers to their prep periods because we value planning time, and hired staff to absorb those positions that were filled by teachers teaching during their prep period. But we had to add classrooms, so we had a place to accommodate the new staff. So every piece of that is falling into place according to plan, according to schedule. And I'm making it sound very simple, but it's been a tremendous amount of work over the past 6 months to get that to happen. Also, I know Mr. Winter is very pleased because we've got returning counselors this year, so we hit the ground running. His administrative staff, his assistant principals are returning, so we hit the ground running. There's a number of elements regarding the high school leadership and just the teaching staff as well is stellar, and so lots of training over the summer, and so I am confident that the first day of school, we're going to be completely ready for all the kids at Maricopa High School. So thank you for asking that and giving us the opportunity to vocalize that. Yes, sir.
I wasn't part of the capital planning, but I did hear lots of different ideas from different people as talked around water coolers and
Mm-hmm.
about some different things. And one of the ideas that I heard, and I don't know if I saw it in the expenditures, but is it true that there's an abandoned building on the high school campus, and is the capital expenditure going to do something with that building? The old gym?
Oh, abandon. We that term threw me. We do have the old gym. Yeah,
But it's not being used today?
It's not usable during the hot months, and then it's kind of overflow during the when the weather is a little bit more cooperative for different practice space and so forth. Am I getting that about 80% right, Mr. Winter?
It's not fully functional because of the air conditioning. It has still got a nice floor, and we do use it in the fall. And in the winter, during the cooler months, our athletic equipment storage room sits off of the old gym as part of it. That is an air-conditioned area, so that is a building that at some point in time in the near future we would like to see restored and functional, but not abandoned by any stretch of the imagination right now, but just not fully functional.
Great question. Yeah.
So tearing it down and building a 2-story or 3-story is classroom?
Not an option. Right. Right. Yeah. Looking for volunteer.
The other idea I heard floating around was having the new high school focus strictly on academics rather than divide up your sports programs. I have 2 boys who are involved in sports at the high school, and one of my fears is that once you divide the student body, the level of sports programs goes down. You lose really good coaches that I really like, and
Thank you for your feedback. Tonight's forum is also about feedback, too. So as we progress through this, the development of our vision for the high school, there's going to be an opportunity for everybody to participate in that conversation, to help us craft that vision. There's some constraints, as you can see from all the data we showed tonight, there's some constraints. But we want to make this high school an enduring school, an enduring high school that stands the test of time, that can meet a variety of needs of a variety of students, a diverse population with diverse interests and talents. And so we're going to need a diverse group to help us develop that and help us craft that path as we go. Yes, sir. Question.
I've been coming into this conversation pretty late, so this may be backtracking just slightly. Has there been discussion, has the community explored the idea of enlarging the current campus versus building a second brand new campus? I can see there would be some benefits, shared facilities and resources, but it is kind of landlocked too. So I don't know if there's been some discussion along that line.
We did discuss that, but it didn't go very far, in part for what the one of the reasons you list. I think Maricopa High School is about 40-some acres. Yeah, 45 acres. So it's just small. So we're looking at a city that's growing and developing, and making sure that we can understand that growth and position a new high school attractively. Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Question I have, and it's regarding the projected growth. I think it was mentioned 500 students, high school students added each year. Obviously, was that a linear growth? Is it going to have, that was K-12?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
a district. Okay,
Yeah.
Okay, because I was thinking you're going to have 5,000 high school students in 10 years. That just didn't seem realistic to me. So, okay, so that's 500 students district-wide. How many of those are, because the main constraint is on the high school, so what is the focus on the high school? How many are we adding to the high school then? Because that's the one that seems to be the immediate concern. The elementaries, I think it was mentioned, has the capacity to absorb that 500. And I guess back to my original question, is that 500 a diminishing curve, or that's what was said, is that the elementaries have the capacity? Some capacity. Okay. I heard they can absorb the capacity. Middle schools are at capacity and high schools over. So.
Aggregate.
Okay.
Right. Aggregate, there's capacity that's open.
Okay. So is that a 500 projection on a linear curve? Is it diminishing? Is it, what's the projection? It's flat. So we're just going to keep growing.
And of course, those 500 students across pre-K 12 don't show up in blocks of 30 students at a grade level. So it's a little, while our growth is, has a straight trajectory, it's not that simple when it comes to staffing, et cetera. So. What other questions or reactions or recommendations? We've had some good recommendations too.
I wanted to say about the enrollment, one of the things that I heard over the last year is that your elementary school K-8 students are, enrollment is affected a lot like charter schools, but not so much in high school. So a lot of those charter school K-8 students will show up in high school because the high school opportunities for charter arts are
Robust.
so that means that growth is projected is disproportionate to high school.
Do we anticipate, or have there been any buzz about other charter
The demographic report and analysis accounts for students that are attending other districts and other charters. So the growth is aggressive. Explosive is the term that we've probably used.
Yeah, and I've been here for 12 years, and we thought it was going to grow, and then obviously the recession hit, and we stopped growing as a city. So for many years it was much more flat. So I guess if we're planning for that, what happens if we're planning for that and then in the middle of it, you know, we can't pay back the bond? That's the investment maker's problem. But
Well, like, first of all, that 10-year average I showed you, that big drop,
yep.
just about everybody across the state, especially in the pretty fast-growing areas like Maricopa. That was an epic recession, first of all. The housing price, the mortgage market was what caused that recession. So we'll have other economic cycles. I'm not sure it will impact property values like that one. Okay? So we might see some of those, obviously. These can't go up forever. Remember, though, that let's say there's a recession in 2021. It softens the market. It won't impact tax values for another 18 months to 2 years. The district will continue growing. Just like this last one, the market crashed, if you will, in 2008. The assessed values didn't start to dip until 2010. Okay, so things still were growing. So, but I will say that provides a nice window. The district can pivot if they have to. They have a 2-year window. If things happen, and they know things are turning down, they're going to have a sense of how bad it is, and maybe they don't settle for any bonds. All right?
I think also, you have to remember when they did the study, it was also a projection of what the city did. And what we did, we had a housing needs study. And the city realized there was a tremendous need for apartments and various things like that, which also projected growth. And then also, planning commission, we've had a record number of continual sites and developers coming in. So I think it's not just the school in isolation. This is all moving into the city's plan about what the city sees as growth and the growth going east, for instance. That's the issue with as far as the schools are concerned. So I think the school's done a really good job of coordinating with the city and their study on population, their study on housing needs, which Maricopa has a real problem with. So I think they're both tying in together.
Yes, Vice Mayor Wade.
In the conversation with consideration in reference to whether or not Heritage starts on time, they're not ready to move on time with the impact it's going to have on students.
Depends who you ask.
Either,
Depends who you ask, because I went out there just the other day and asked that question, and they said, oh, there's no problem at all. But when you talk to some of the people putting out, there is a real question.
Yeah, the staff doesn't.
my question is still, I just,
Yeah, the staff is.
We're ready.
I had lunch with the vice principal today. He's told me that they will start on time, venue maintenance. So they have some things in the background to get ready to house those students. The facilities are quite ready. It's doubtful that the facilities are going to be ready.
But they do have sites now.
Ms. Ball?
So in Facebook Live into teachers, so I feel like I have to ask a question on behalf of
Nice.
teachers.
Okay.
What can teachers be doing as we start this new school year in regards to this conversation?
Because I know we're gonna have parents.
Yeah.
Well, as when teachers are teachers, they can share factual information. This will remain posted, I believe, either on YouTube or whatever wherever we have our board meeting information, which is YouTube. So getting to know this information, understanding the certainly the needs and the depth of the analysis that took place last fall with our capital planning committee, understanding that, talking to their administrators, because each administrator met, each principal met with Mark Rafferty to talk about their facility. So making sure they understand the facts, and also becoming familiar with the nuances that Mike Lavallee shared regarding those tax rates and the fluid nature and the interdependence of those variables. That's going to be very important. When teachers are not teachers, they'll have opportunities to join Mary Grace, you know, in the off hours to do what they feel they need to do, you know, to do whatever they feel they need to do. You know, it may not be what Paul Ulam does, which is, you know, bring ballots to his kids. I do my democracy in person. I vote at the polls. But so there's going to be ample opportunities for them to receive the factual information so that they know the where we've been as a district in our investigation and our analysis, and what the path going forward entails.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Are you asking for teachers to, in their classrooms, to give out these facts?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Thank you for clarifying.
In the past, that didn't happen.
Well,
The override went through, teachers were pushing that in the classroom, which made very uncomfortable for a lot of other people. So I'm just saying, very people that get really involved in it and really want to go, you know, and they do that, I think they lose sight of they're supposed to be teaching.
absolutely.
Not financial stuff. They don't want to raise people's property taxes. That's, you know, that's not the okay thing.
The amount of email that went out to staff during that cycle was like never ending in
Yeah.
terms of what you were supposed to and what you weren't supposed to.
Yeah. It's the guidelines are very clear. And if we hear, if we hear about, a teacher becoming overzealous and crossing a line, we will definitely make sure that the kids are protected from this conversation. But teachers need to know the facts for their own benefit, for their own circles that they are in. I wouldn't expect them to use this content to teach percentages or anything like that. But thank you for giving us the chance to, on Facebook Live, reinforce that line and making sure that there's a very clear delineation between, using the classroom and our school resources for something that we're not supposed to. We'll be very careful about that. Thank you. Yes.
Last rumor I heard, and maybe you can dispel this. Hiring school district, they bus a fair amount of our kids. I heard hiring school district was getting overcrowded as well, and one of the options might be for them to just cut off the buses from Maricopa. Is that true? And we would basically have all of those students as well in our district, possibly?
You know, I am up to my eyeballs in MaricopaUnified. I don't know what those details are, but we're prepared to be agile with our plans. Yeah. We would love to welcome every Maricopa resident in our schools. That would be our pleasure and our honor.
I have a couple of quick clarifications.
Yeah.
We have 8 classroom buildings. You said 8 classrooms.
Oh,
It's
16, right.
So that's kind of, Mr. Wayne, that's kind of a difference.
To the math department, yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Clarification, and there was an awful lot of discussion to your question about how possible or feasible would it be to expand on the existing Maricopa High School site or an adjacent site, perhaps. And so when you expand with classrooms, it's not the same idea until I was smacked down about the old gym. But a great site for another classroom. But you can't just expand classrooms
Well, thank you so much for your time. We've talked, I'm glad we got to talk about our temporary fix at the high school and how we want to turn that into a lasting solution that makes our community proud. If you think about your growing family, you know, you might start off in a small house, and as your family grows, you buy some bunk beds, and you put the little ones all in one room together. Well, our family is growing, and a small house with some bunk beds is kind of what we have with our 16 portable classrooms. That is temporary. Those are leased because we want to look at the long-term future of the city of Maricopa and how Maricopa Unified fits into that and how we can educate kids here to do our part to make this a vibrant city. So it's been an amazing exploration to this point, and I know that the conversation is going to continue, and we will have more opportunities. We will have more stakeholder forums. We know we have a very vociferous community who lets us know what they think all the time, and we welcome all of that. So with that, we will we'll remain around here for a few individual questions or comments. But I want to thank everyone again, our board, our elected officials, our parents, our teachers, our community members, our faith-based, and our team that has been at our side for almost a year now. I appreciate it. Thank you, and have a good night.